5-Minute Friday. Let's go home. Let's put 5 minutes on the clock and get this week's question started. This week's question came in from Andy here on Welder Skills, and he asked about selecting the darkness of the shade of your hood and how that can affect what you're actually seeing. And I do think a lot of people probably weld with their hoods a little bit too dark. And now that goes be a little bit controversial, I think, mainly because you're the only one that sees out of your eyes. So you have to pick the darkness for what works for you. And you might think that you need to run like an 11 or 12 or maybe even a 13 all the time, but it goes along with what you're working on. For instance, one shop that I worked at, our max amperage that we were allowed to do was 55 amps. So I wouldn't want to run a hood that ran only a number 11 in there, because I wouldn't be able to see what I was doing, because I didn't have enough amps to make that worthwhile. So I ran consistently there a number 8, and that was on a Miller Digital Elite and my 9100, the 3M 9100, and those have the lower settings so that you could go down to a number 8, and I believe maybe even a little lower, but that worked out really well for me there. But it's because there was much lower amperage. I mean, I remember one job that we had there where you literally set the machine to 12 amps and floored it. That was it. So if all you had was a passive hood with a number 11 lens in it, well, that might make that a little bit more challenging. So you want to be able to see what you're doing. So if you have a good auto darkening helmet with pretty good technology in it, you can really fine tune and adjust the darkness to your specific eyes. And I would suggest try to go a little bit lighter than you think you need to go, depending again on what you're doing. Now, if you're doing really thick, heavy duty aluminum running at 300 amps, well, of course you're going to bump it up to 12 or 13, and that's going to still be really, really bright. But something else to consider, I saw a comment come in from Alex, and he mentioned look around for the light in your environment. So if you're doing a lot of small parts or something, or if you're having a hard time seeing, if you can add external lights to like your weld bench, then that will make being able to see even in your hood that much better, so you can change the darkness of your lens. Now, I will say, if you're adding lights over your bench, make sure to have it in front of you so the light is casting down onto your parts, not to where you're leaning over, because you don't want the light to come in from the back of your hood, because then you're just going to cast the shadow of your head and your face onto the lens, making it much harder to see. So you want to make sure to think about where you're placing those lights above you and have them in front of you so the light is actually coming down onto the bench. Funny story, talking about passive lenses, I was thinking about this a couple days ago when I was thinking about this question, and the first time I ever saw somebody changing the lenses in their hood for the job they were working on was at the first aerospace company I worked at. And I remember thinking it was odd that this guy was taking his passive lens out and putting in a different lens, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he just said, he's like, well, I'm doing this job that's a lot smaller, so I put in a number 9 lens instead of my normal number 11. And he's like, I've got 9, 10, 11, 12. He had all the different lenses and everything. And it really kind of struck me like, I never really thought of doing that, because at the time I had just got my first auto tint lens, and I pretty much just left it on the same shade all the time. And prior to that, I had the same passive hood that I never changed the lens on. So I kind of wondered to myself how it would have differed for me if I had changed the lens on those for different jobs. But hindsight's 2020. I did start to change the shade darkness in my auto tint lens from then on. So try and experiment a little bit and try to go a little bit lighter than you probably think you should, and just see how that is. Now, like I said before, you're the only one that looks through your eyes, so you're the only one that can really tell if this is too bright or if it's not bright enough. So if you think it's too bright, then go up. If you have the option to do a half shade, go up a half of a shade. Or if you have like an op trail hood or something with the adjustments on the sides, you can really fine tune them and get them right to where they need to be for your eyes. And with saying that, some of the newer hoods, they have an auto set feature to them, and I've got a couple of them that have that feature, and I don't use it. I personally do not like the auto sets, mainly because it doesn't know what I'm seeing. It doesn't know what you're seeing. It just knows what it thinks it should be. And it might work for you, but for me personally, I like to set it, if I'm doing a really small job, I'll set it really low at about 8 and 8.5 or so. And then if I'm going heavier, turning it up. And I'll be honest and say I'm guilty of getting onto a real heavy aluminum job or something where I'm blasting 300 amps and I've got my hood set at shade 8, and you really notice the difference. But it's just a quick reach in, turn it down, or reach up, turn it down, whatever, turn it up. But hopefully that helps a little bit. And thank you for the question, Andy, and thank you for the reply to that question, Alex, about the lights in your booth, because that really can make a big difference. And selecting the right shade for your hood can really make a big difference on how you're seeing the weld and how you're seeing the puddle. Because if you can't see the puddle clearly, you're not going to be able to make a really good weld. So hopefully that helps. Thank you guys for the question, and we'll catch you next week. And if you're a patron of the podcast, you'll understand this. See ya!